Good morning. Thank you all for coming in this morning. My name is John Herbst, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I spent 3 years in Uzbekistan from 2000 to 2003 as the American ambassador. We have an excellent panel to discuss Uzbekistan with you today. And we'll lead off with Mara Burr, who is the Deputy USTR, the Special Trade Representative for South and Central Asia.
Good morning, everyone. I guess it's on. Great. Yeah. Well, I want to thank the Turkic American Convention, both the organizers and the sponsors, for the opportunity to participate in this program. And obviously, I am very pleased to be here with this distinguished panel. I think with respect to U.S.-Uzbek relations, it's important to look at what we've accomplished over the last several years. As everyone's aware, Uzbekistan became an independent country, declared its independence in 1991, and the United States established an embassy in Tashkent in 1992, along with diplomatic relations. Since 1992, which is a relatively short period of time, we've been able to accomplish a lot in the area of trade and investment. On June 1st, 2004, the United States and the 5 Central Asian republics signed a trade and investment framework agreement. And this trade and investment framework agreement seeks to address impediments to trade and investment between Central Asia and the United States and between the Central Asian countries themselves. We also have specific requirements in the TIFA related to trade with Afghanistan. And for the last few years, Afghanistan has sat as an observer to our Trade and Investment Framework Agreement Council meetings. In 2011, we established bilateral working groups under the TIFA, where the U.S. and each Central Asian country can discuss trade and investment issues that basically are between the two countries. And we've also encouraged other countries in the TIFA, the other parties to the TIFA, to establish bilateral working groups where they can discuss trade and investment issues. In 2011 and 2012, we also established working groups on customs, women's economic empowerment, standards, including sanitary and phytosanitary standards and technical barriers to trade, and one on transparency and public participation. These working groups, we hope, will work to address improving discussions in each of the countries on these important areas and on improving the trade and investment relationship so that goods and services can flow across borders in a manner that encourages private sector investment in the region. And many of these decisions are based on the realization that certain conditions must be created to expand trade and promote greater investment. And those are ensuring transparent and understandable legal and regulatory regime where obligations can be understood and implemented, a functioning legal system where disputes can be adjudicated in a reasonable period of time and the outcomes are final, not open to reopening for political or other non-legal reasons, customs and border systems, and practices that promote the free flow of goods and services with minimal delays and are free of corruption. I know my colleague, Rear Admiral McLaren, will talk about customs issues. And the necessary infrastructure that allows goods to move freely between countries by road, rail, or air. These elements are important, but not entirely sufficient. Through the TIFA process, all of the TIFA parties have shared their views on expanding trade and investment opportunities in the region. And as with the rest of the world, Kyrgyzstan has shared its experiences, as has the United States, as a member of the World Trade Organization. Recently, we congratulate Tajikistan for becoming the 159th member of the World Trade Organization on March 2nd. We know that our colleagues in Uzbekistan are very interested in accession to the World Trade Organization and have recently been working with the Secretariat in Geneva to restart their working party that has not met for a few years. And why is the World Trade Organization an attractive institution to address some of the same issues that we're addressing in the TIFA, because it's a valuable asset for each of the Central Asian republics as they work to improve trade and investment relationships in the region. As members of the rules-based international system, investors will have more confidence in Central Asia and will expect a high level of coordination and cooperation on trade and investment decision-making between those countries. We think this is a very good opportunity. This time is a very good time, a good opportunity for the Central Asian republics to start working more closely together and coordinate on trade and investment decisions, to really take a look at the Central Asian economies and determine what steps they can take to improve both trade and investment. We were looking at some of the trade numbers in Central Asia, and I think it underscores the importance of improving both trade and investment decision-making, improving that coordination and cooperation. The IMF reports that Central Asian exports amounted to about 4.6% of their total exports in 2011. Essentially, we see that the exports between the Central Asian countries were in the millions, not in the billions, and not particularly high. Basically, the intra-Central Asia trade totaled about $1.4 billion in 1995 and $2.7 billion in 2010. So that's all of the trade between all of the countries. And that number is relatively low. The amount in absolute terms has increased, but you also have to take a look, you have to take into account the amounts for oil and gas. So why is it important for Uzbekistan? Well, Uzbekistan has one of the oldest and strongest economies in the region. It has a population of approximately 28 million people, and it provides an attractive market for both trade and investment. But if we look at absolute numbers in the region, taking Afghanistan as part of Central Asia just for trade and investment, we see about 93.5 million people as a market. Just for comparison, Japan has just over 127 million people, and Germany, as the 5th largest economy, has 82 million people. So if Central Asia were to improve its cooperation and coordination on trade and investment issues, it would have the ability to reach a market of 93 million people, which would be a very attractive market for trade and investment for the private sector. And we hope to see Uzbekistan take a lead in improving trade and investment decision-making in the region. We think as a country that has three of the most important cities on the famed Silk Road, it has a long tradition of trade. It has a long tradition of trade being at the very root of its economy. And Uzbekistan is in a very unique position to move forward both on trade and investment issues. Our relationship with Uzbekistan is strong. We have a very good trade and investment discussion at our annual meetings. We have very robust discussions in our bilateral working groups. And Uzbekistan has shown a great deal of enthusiasm for trying to find ways to promote its economy and to promote itself as a trade and investment destination. And we hope through our trade and investment framework agreement and through interest in acceding to the WTO, we can make great progress with Central Asia to develop an economy that is worthy of the great tradition of this region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mara. We'll hold questions till after all the speakers have spoken. And our next speaker is Ibrat Usmanov, who is a consultant here in Washington for Uzbekistan, Central Asia, and Russia, the greater newly independent states. And he also worked with me at our embassy in Tashkent over 10 years ago. Ibrat?
Thank you, Mr. Messer. I would like today to stand mostly on a new direction and in terms of attraction of foreign investments and creation of a special economic zone in Uzbekistan. There are right now one established special economic zone Right now, it's a Navai free industrial economic zone, which I think was one of the successful compared with the past experience of Uzbekistan in terms of promotion and attraction of the foreign investment in the economy of Uzbekistan. The Uzbekistan Free Industrial Economic Zone Navai was created according to decree of President of Uzbekistan Islam Karimov on December 2nd, 2008 as a territory of Navai region of Republic of Uzbekistan. And it's located in the territory of 564 hectares near Navai city, one of the most industrial in Uzbekistan, and 100 roughly and 175 kilometers away from big cities in the industrial center of Uzbekistan like Bukhara and Samarkand. And Navai Special Economic Zone is a subject of special legislative regulations, including for taxing, currency, customs, and simplified order for entry, stay, and departure for non-residents of Uzbekistan. Comprehensive preferences apply for tax, customs, and other obligatory payments. Operation period of Navai Free Economic Zone is 30 years with a possibility of further extension. Land parcels at the territory of Navai Special Economic Zone provided for rent to businessmen for the period of investment activity at very low rates or free of charge. This is why business don't have any need to buy land to start production and therefore don't have to make additional spendings. To ensure the most comfortable condition for investors, production sites in Navai Free Industrial Economic Zone are provided with a high-level infrastructure. There is another decree issued recently about the creation of the Angren Special Economic Zone, which I would like to concentrate it more. I know this area very well. It's located 100 kilometers from Tashkent, just 30 kilometers before the Kamchin and Rizak mountain pass. People called it mostly Kakand mountain pass, which connected whole Uzbekistan with the Fergana Valley. This Angren city was created in 1940s, 1950s by central government in Moscow after the findings a huge deposit of brown coal in Angren area. In the meantime, they were found also the uranium, copper, and other raw materials. And one of the famous two places in terms of these rare deposits was Yangiabad town and one of the small towns in the area of the Kurama Mountains in the Namangan region. And I think there's still great challenge for the local authorities, also in the central government of Uzbekistan, to attract foreign investments to develop further this area, because the Angren city and the towns around the Angren city with a population more than 100,000 population, where the majority people very well educated. Many people come during the Soviet era from the different part of the Soviet Union. It will be very good also assets in creation of joint ventures in this free economic zone. There another special economic zone just called Jizak High-Tech Industrial Park. I would like to mention mostly concentrated on bilateral relations between Uzbekistan and China. During their negotiations, both parts came to an agreement to establish special economic zone in form of a high-tech industrial park in the central Uzbek city, Jizak. Jizak was famous during the Soviet era with the infrastructure of the network of the plants which produce machinery. And as a result of the negotiations with China, between Uzbekistan and China Development Bank will provide a 50 million loan to finance several of joint projects in construction, agro-industrial, and mechanical engineering sectors. I would like to emphasize also that Jizak region, Tashkent region, Navai, Samarkand, Bukhara, I will stop later on Fergana Valley. They're all very rich with agricultural fruits and vegetables. And I think every year there is a lot of losses of very tasty fruits. Many people say that the fruits in Uzbekistan are the best in the world. And there is I think one of the attractive sector of the economy for foreign investors that will bring the food processing equipment and investments into this sector. Despite that, I know that everybody of you knows that how important role plays the Fergana Valley. There is a big cities in the Fergana Valley like Fergana, Kokand, Margilan, Kuwasai, Kuwa. This is only a Fergana region, but there is 3 regions in Fergana Valley, Andijan and Namangan. And I think will be better. Everybody says that stability in Uzbekistan and the whole Central Asia depends on stability in Fergana Valley. And I think if there will be created a few, not just one, a few special economic zones on the in the regions between the Fergana region and Namangan region, Fergana region and Andijan region, between Namangan and Andijan, it will create more job opportunities for local population, and will prevent also prevent from recruiting by the terrorist organizations among the local populations, you know. And I think the population of Uzbekistan, and specifically in this area, will be more, we're looking forward toward the Western, more developed areas rather than looking for a backward about the creation like so-called caliphate. In the meantime, there are one of the examples is just recently the Chinese oil company CNPC signed a contract with the Andijan branch of Uzbekneftegas on developing oil well deposits in the Namangan region and the Mimbulak region, and they will the estimate total that I think 2 million barrels of oil in this district of Namangan region. And I think another one of the promising sector, but it's not developing. I think many people do not pay attention to this. There are 365, 66 days in year. And I think in Uzbekistan has more than 300 years of sunny days. And one of the most promising, I think, investment will be to create a production of solar energy production in Uzbekistan area. I used to live in the, I used to have a dacha in this Inangren area and close to a mountain area. And as those blends mountain areas, you know, they're just empty. Some companies, cell phone companies, placing some advertisement stands on the top of the mountains with advertising of their products. But some idea came up to me that it will be good if there will be production of the solar panel and placed on these mountain areas which just empty, and will create the alternative energy in Uzbekistan. In other sectors for selling equipment for Uzbekistan, it's, I think, the machinery, food processing, oil refinery, telecommunications, textiles, and natural gas. I think all of this sector will be high promising for future foreign investments into the economy of Uzbekistan. Thank you very much.
Ibrad, thank you very much. And we now have Rear Admiral McLaren, who is the head of the Joint Contingency Acquisition Support Office at the Defense Logistics Agency. Admiral?
So good morning. Why is a Navy guy in this convention? And what does a Navy guy have to do with a landlocked country such as Uzbekistan?
Double landlocked.
Procurement, that's a very good, but even before we get to business, one of the things that I am a logistician working for the Defense Logistics Agency, and one of the directives that we have is to coordinate for the United States Central Command local procurement in Central Asia in support of the Northern Distribution Network. All right, and the Northern Distribution Network, I know was discussed this morning just briefly in some of the keynote speakers at breakfast, is simply supply routes going through Central Asia, of which one of the major ones goes through Uzbekistan on its way to Afghanistan to supply our warfighters in Afghanistan with much needed commodities that they need, both food, construction materials, and things like that. So it was recognized very early on because prior to the creation of the Northern Distribution Network, everything was going through Pakistan, okay? And as a logistician, just having one supply route is not a good thing. So we wanted to create multiple supply routes to eliminate any possibilities that we might run short of supplies. And when you're fighting a war, you know, things such as bullets and things like that are critical. So, so with that being said, at that time, the U.S. Central Commander, General Petraeus, signed out a letter that we all call the Policy Letter Number 40. And it was reissued by General Mattis when he took over. And it recognized the strategic importance of Central Asia relationships with Afghanistan. It recognized the importance of the Northern Distribution Network as a route, both for military use as well as for trade. And it also recognized that regional trade was important to the security of the region. So indulge me right now. I'm just going to read you two excerpts out of that policy letter number 40. One is the purpose and one was the policy/intent. So the purpose was to expand economic partnership with the Central Asian states in support of the command's security cooperation and engagement missions, and to ensure access to and expansion of capacity on the Northern Distribution Network in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. The policy and the intent: leverage the command's activities and resources to provide opportunities for economic expansion, increased entrepreneurship, and skills training for the people of Central Asian states in order to maximize positive long-term impacts on local economies and workforces in these countries. It goes on to further state, quote, advance economic development, good governance, and stability across the region. So first of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the government of Uzbekistan for everything they've done in support of the Northern Distribution Network, allowing us access and through their countries of vital supplies was extremely important to the efforts in Afghanistan. And also in this endeavor, you mentioned procurement. I also need to thank the Ministry of Foreign Economic Relations, Investment, and Trade for their assistance in helping us to get this project going. And also we are in a continuous dialogue with them on a regular basis to continue this effort. So, creation of this network through Central Asia, Uzbekistan allowed us through rights to be able to do this. In the discussions at very high levels, they talked about, you know, as we go through Uzbekistan, are there not products and things that we might need for the warfighter in Afghanistan? And so our senior officials said, yeah, we think so. So with that, embarked this local procurement initiative. So this started back in 2008. I got on board in 2010, and it was very slow going at the beginning. So first question you ask is, how do you buy something in a country that you know very little about? Now, I've been to Uzbekistan now many times. I have the visas in my passport to prove it. I've been to many of the regions that my esteemed colleague mentioned about places for investment. And my reason for going there was show and tell. Because there's no yellow pages. Google searches will only get you so far. To go there, you also require visas, so that has to be coordinated and planned. Guess what? While many do speak English, a lot of places where we go didn't speak English, so I had language barriers. Currency conversions that we had to deal with. The banking regulations are different than the United States banking regulations, so we had to get used to that. Our own procurement regulations are very strict on how we can do procurement, and the way of doing business in Uzbekistan is different than the way we do business in the United States. We had this thing called ASTM, which my engineer is over there. He can explain that in thorough detail if you're totally bored and want something to talk about. But it's basically the engineering standards that the U.S. uses when we're doing construction and whether or not something meets a requirement. And in Uzbekistan, you operated under the former Soviet Union standard, GOS standards, which are their equivalent engineering standards. But we didn't have an equivalency chart. American, GOS standard. Which one is which and how do you match those up? So we had to work through that. We have a bidding process that talks about best and final. So we say, we want to buy this glass, give me your best and final price. Uzbekistan, for those of you who've done business in Uzbekistan, the price is up here, and when we say that's too high, I'm sorry you didn't get the bid, they go, wait, we got to talk about this. This is how we do business here. Well, this is how we do business. So we had to come to a middle ground and work through that. Also, the business practices for doing business of upfront payments is also something different that is not how we do business in the United States, to the extent that they do it in Uzbekistan. Their bureaucracy, our bureaucracy, okay? There's blame enough for both sides, trying to work through some of that. And I don't say that in a mean-spirited way. It's just, running a sovereign country on either side is quite an endeavor, and as you continue to work the policies and procedures to make trade be easier, those are things that you discover. And lastly, one of the challenges we had in doing business in Uzbekistan was our own procurement organizations. So I mentioned that I'm from the Defense Logistics Agency. That is one procurement organization of many within the U.S. Department of Defense. So I had to go and talk to all these different procurement agencies about doing business in Uzbekistan for products that they were buying elsewhere for Afghanistan. And that was in itself a challenge because the standard answer is we don't do things that way. And so we had to break some of the common ways of how we do business here in the States to meet General Petraeus's, General Mattis's strategic intent on doing the things that I read to you. So, I told you this started back in 2008. I got here in 2010 to help coordinate that. Last year, we grew our local procurement over 2008 when we started by over 2,600%. 2,600%, okay? That is huge, all right? Last year, we more than doubled what we were able to procure in Uzbekistan over the first 3 years, 2008 through 2011. Actually, 4 years. Okay, it's even bigger. All right, so how did we do that? I mentioned all those things that were different about doing business in Uzbekistan versus how we do it in the United States. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy, but where there is a will, there is a way. First of all, we, on our side, the procurement organizations, we had it all wrong. Okay, first of all, we didn't know the country. So what's the first thing you say when you don't know a country? Oh, they don't have anything you need, they don't make anything that we want, they can't meet our quality standards, the prices are going to be too high. That's the immediate first reaction of everyone, because they don't know. All right, so what did we do to overcome our preset notions about not just Uzbekistan, but Central Asia as a whole? The best way to do that was I drugged them along with me, and we went to Central Asia, we went to Uzbekistan, and we visited Navoi, we visited Bukhara, we visited Tashkent, and many other places, and we went to factories and looked at how they did things and compared it to our factories. Now, granted, there are some very rudimentary factories in Uzbekistan, but there are rudimentary factories here in the United States, okay? So you won't know till you go and look. But that being said, there were also some very good factories, very high modern equipment, high technologically advanced, able to do the things that we needed to do. I did not know until I went to Uzbekistan that there was a General Motors plant in Uzbekistan making General Motors cars. Okay? So we tested the products. We didn't take their word for it, but we don't, you know, that would be a standard business practice anywhere. When you're exploring new vendors, you test the product and find out from an independent tester whether or not it met the specifications, and they did. We researched the GOS standards to match them up, and you know, because it was unknown to us, and because we also had the preconceived former Soviet Union mentality that it must be a bad standard, the standards are very good standards. They just needed to be matched up to the equivalency. Engineering is engineering, and the Soviet standards were very good. We just needed to get the right one so that it was an equivalency. All right, as far as the price competitiveness of the Uzbek's products, well, just like anywhere, some prices came in high, other prices came in low. I wouldn't have increased local procurement by 2,600% if the prices were all high. All right, so part of this was a learning curve on the Uzbek vendors. Anybody in business is going to get the maximum price that they can get. That's all right, and you don't learn until you don't win the award, right? And guess what? We're competing this in Central Asia. So if an Uzbek vendor didn't get it, who do you think got it? Because we were buying it in Central Asia. So the Kazakhs, the Kyrgyz are the two other primary countries that we're buying products from. One of those vendors got it. Next time around, we need the product again. They learned their lesson, and they were the more competitive, and they should be. All right? Every time I met with a ministry in Uzbekistan, they said, our price is always going to be the lowest. I go, well, prove it. That's always the discussion when you're in business. So, but, you know, the standard practice in the United States with contracting is if you're the high bidder, you know, we don't try to work with you. You know, we just go to the low bidder and award the contract and move on. Well, in Central Asia, with Uzbekistan, with each one of the countries, we worked with each of the vendors and say, you know, when we say best and final offer, it means best and final. It's not a negotiation. So if you really want a shot at the business, you really need to give us your best shot right up front. And that was a learning curve that we went through. But we did somewhat of training on that. We had industry days where we talked about the things that we needed, the types of standards that we needed, and we also gave a list of prices of products that we had purchased in the past because that's public information, and said, here's the prices we pay for these products in the past. Now, you know, in college, when the professor had an important point, you know, he'd stamp his foot and say, pay attention to this point. So your prices need to be in this competitive range, or somebody else is going to win the contract. So I think sometimes they took it to heart, sometimes they didn't, but that's part of business. So we were able to get through that and find that there are ways to do business in Central Asia, ways to do business in Uzbekistan. And we also had to adapt our ways of doing business, in that direct government contracting by the United States government with an Uzbek vendor wasn't the way to go, because U.S. government regulations for contracting require each of the vendors to register, to get a DUNS number, all this bureaucracy to even be able to bid. And then there was a very bureaucratic system of bidding. So we said that model's not going to work. And we used, along with our partners, the General Services Administration, what we call a prime vendor model. We actually do a contract for a vendor who bids on going out and getting bids from Central Asia. And they go and have the discussions with the factories and the discussion on the pricing and the quality. And then they bring it back to us and we approve it, and then they actually do the contract with them, and we pay our prime vendor. That has worked out very, very well, and has been one of the reasons for the success and the growth of what we're buying in Uzbekistan. To the point about our own contracting organizations, we had to do an all-out press, meeting one-on-one with our government contracting organizations to go through the rationale, the reason at a very high level to get them on board, and we were able to win them over one at a time. And for what they need, we now coordinate to try to buy in Central Asia. And we actually worked legislation through our legislative process to allow us to, in contracting, to be able to just bid products in Central Asia as opposed to globally like we do now. Anybody in the world could bid on a product. We actually gave Central Asia preference, which obviously included Uzbekistan in that, and we narrowed it down. Now, you know, I know this is the Turkic convention, so there's Turkey here and Azerbaijan here. They didn't get the preference, okay? Just only the Central Asian states, and they were name by name. And the last thing that we continued to do was persistence. Persist, persist, persist. When we failed, you know, you just get up and try again. And you know, that was a huge, huge endeavor, because if it had been hard and we gave up the first try, then we would not have reached General Petraeus's and General Mattis's strategic intent. So what are the kinds of things what I'm talking about? You know, obviously, one of the things that we talk about at this convention is trade routes. Well, you know, the development of the Northern Distribution Network as a trade route involves transportation. And that was a huge input into this equation, was not only the transportation going through the country, but also the fees that get associated with transportation when it comes into a country goes into, obviously, the government for other uses, for helping invest in the country's infrastructure. We're buying lumber, dimensional lumber. You know, there is no Home Depot or Lowe's that I've been able to find in Uzbekistan, right? So if we need 2x4s, we use a lot of those. Those types is what we call dimensional lumber. We're buying all our lumber right now from Uzbekistan in support of Afghanistan. All right, now, I'm giving the Uzbeks fair warning. The Kazakhs are interested in it, but they have a lumber ban right now, export ban, but they're looking at lifting it, so they're starting to prime their lumber mills to be able to bid on some of this product. So, and that's a good thing for competition. It's good for the region to continue to do that and be competitive. Rock salt, electrical cable, bottled water, juices, fuel drums, cleaners, trash bags, rebar, those little metal rods that go in cement when you're laying a road for reinforcement, plastic dinnerware, pasta, toilet paper, nails, not these kind, but the nails that you hammer, hand sanitizer, cement. Now that's just a few of the things, and it's a broad array of products. Some things that you eat, some things are construction material, and other things for other uses. But it gives you a broad range of the types of products that are available if you look in Uzbekistan. And we're continuing to look. Office supplies, copier paper. Now, copier paper, you know, in Central Asia, you use a different size than we use here in the United States, but we've adapted to that, and most copiers will take those different size papers. But so we're looking for that. Furniture, tools, pipes, and other types of construction supplies. Now, our criteria for buying in Uzbekistan goes on a priority system, and we ask basically 4 questions. Is it mined in Uzbekistan? Yes or no? If yes, okay. Is it manufactured in Uzbekistan? Yes or no? If yes, okay. Is it assembled in Uzbekistan? Yes or no? If yes, okay. If it's not any of those, and it's not made anywhere in Central Asia, we will look at distributorships. But it depends on the country of origin of where that distributorship gets the product as to whether or not we can buy it if they're a competitive bid. So we try to do that. And obviously, on any of the products, as I mentioned, we do verify the quality. Okay? So what are the opportunities? My esteemed colleague here mentioned the fresh fruits and vegetables, and I will vouch, because I personally have eaten the fresh fruits and vegetables, that they are very delicious. The issue that we have with buying the product is food sanitation and food safety standards that the U.S. requires us before we can buy, requires that the facilities pass these sanitation and food safety inspections by our, not my personal inspectors, but by an organization under the Department of Defense. And they have to be certified to that. And that's very difficult. That is very bureaucratic and very stringent standards. And it's been difficult to be able to find vendors willing to undergo that type of process in any of the Central Asian states. But I did mention that we are buying bottled water, juices, pasta. Those companies have. The juices and bottled water are typically using like the Coca-Cola plant or the Pepsi plant or the Nestle plant. They have international standards and are used to this type of standard. All right? The pasta plant was able, through much effort, to get approved, and we want to continue that. And there's a process that we will do to do that. But again, if you can get that up to speed, you know, not only can you sell to the United States, but you can also sell to European Union because they have very similar standards as we have for food safety. Canned goods would be another area for a lot of that type of thing. Another issue with fresh fruits and vegetables is, and the example I give is like if I buy fresh tomato from Uzbekistan and I want it shipped to Afghanistan for use at the dining facilities, I need tomatoes to be there at the other end when they get there and not tomato sauce. Okay, so packaging of fresh fruits and vegetables is a huge concern. When you go to the grocery store, your local grocery store, you don't want to buy the bruised fruit. You want to buy the ones that are nice and no bruising and things like that. So that's an opportunity there. And the quantities that we buy are large quantities, so it's very difficult to find a fresh fruit and vegetable vendor that can meet our quantity requirements. So there might be an opportunity for either a co-op or a consolidator of some sort. Okay? We obviously would love to increase the breadth, the types of vendors and quality of vendors that are out there. And that helps not only to improve the pricing from competition, but also for improves reliability so that we're not relying on just one source. Okay, Ms. Burr mentioned customs. Again, customs across the region, the better we can facilitate standardization of processes, the easier that will make it to do business, not just for the military, but for trade in general. Okay, I have to do the business, but businesses can go where it's easy to do business, and they will choose to go the easier route because they're in it to make a profit, to make a margin, and if it's easier to make the same margin somewhere else, they'll do that. Okay, and another great opportunity is obviously, it was also mentioned about leaving Afghanistan, and what went in must come out. And there's opportunities for transportation going out back through the NDN back to wherever it needs to go, wherever that is decided to go. So with that, let me say the bottom line is this. All those misconceived notions that we had about Uzbekistan is wrong. Uzbekistan has capability, it has quality products, it has delicious products, and it continues to improve on its competitiveness within the region. So we remain committed to doing business in Uzbekistan, and we hope that in the years to come that we're able to expand it to include many, many more vendors. So thank you very much.
Admiral, thank you for that in-depth presentation on what DLA is doing with Uzbekistan. I'm going to take just a few minutes to make some general comments. We've had excellent detailed presentations on the state of the U.S.-Uzbek economic relationship, on investment opportunities in Uzbekistan, and on DLA's comprehensive efforts to purchase items in Uzbekistan. I'm going to give you a little bit of the framework in which we're operating so you can better understand not just where we are today, but where we may be tomorrow. This is actually an excellent time to be talking about American-Uzbek economic cooperation because the bilateral relationship between the United States and Uzbekistan is, in historical terms, relatively close right now. But we need to understand why it's relatively close. And the answer is actually pretty simple. The United States has a very strong, I would say short-term, but with maybe beyond short-term interest in Afghanistan and making sure things in Afghanistan turn out right. And this current phase, this current positive phase in the U.S.-Uzbek relationship really can be traced back to the logistical need that the Admiral mentioned, which is we realized 2007, 2008, that we needed another point of access into Afghanistan besides Pakistan. And we decided to create the Northern Distribution Network, which would have been impossible without the active cooperation of Tashkent. And this development led to the, what I'd call the second honeymoon in the U.S.-Uzbek relationship. The first came right after 9/11 when I, in fact, was working in Tashkent. So we have, and we, I mean the United States, has critical reasons to develop the relationship with Uzbekistan right now to the fullest extent possible. But the reasons we have are not reasons that are going to last forever. And so to understand where the U.S.-Uzbek relationship might go and how that might influence our economic ties with Uzbekistan, you have to look at America's long-term interests, not just in Uzbekistan, but in Central Asia. And those interests are also substantial, but they're complicated, they're complex. Unfortunately, we don't have a map here of Eurasia. But if we did, you'd see that Central Asia, as its name suggests, is right smack in the middle of what the great geopolitician Mackinder called the world island, meaning Eurasia. And Uzbekistan is smack in the middle of Central Asia. And if you look at that map, you know that to the east of Central Asia, you have China. To the north, you have Russia. To the southwest, you have Iran. To the southeast, you have the subcontinent, you have India. So you have great and regional powers all around Central Asia. And the United States, as a great power, has an interest in making certain that Central Asia is stable and is not a region where one of those great or regional powers can take over. So we have an interest in the independence of Central Asia. A related point, which has a lot to do with the history of the region and of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan in particular. We have an interest in stemming the tide of extremist Islam. And the Uzbek people and the Tajik people have been devout Muslims going back to well, it depends how you read history, but certainly Central Asia was Islamicized in the 8th century. And efforts by China to exert its influence in Central Asia in the 8th century were defeated at the Battle of Talas by Arab troops, Arab and Muslim troops. And the history of Central Asia has ever since been a great Islamic history. And the great Islamic civilization of the 8th and 9th and 10th centuries was in large part a Central Asian civilizational achievement, evident today in Samarkand and Bukhara. And the Tajik and the Uzbek peoples are the great heirs to that tradition. And Salafi Islam has made its way into Central Asia, largely due to outside influences, because the Islam of Central Asia has been traditionally quite moderate. The Hanafi school, Sufi influence, all intellectual and religious tendencies which have had little to do with the extremism we've seen as a world problem today. But the problem of Islamic extremism is nonetheless a real one in Central Asia. And we want to make sure that the countries of Central Asia are able to keep that type of Islam at a distance. So that's another long-term interest of the United States in the region. Central Asia, as we've learned from the panel, and Uzbekistan in particular, as we've learned from the panel, is an area of serious economic resources. In the first instance, hydrocarbons. Well, that's more a story for Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, although Uzbekistan also has substantial natural gas capacities, which the Chinese have duly noted. There's also uranium, gold, and of course Uzbekistan has cotton too. So there are economic interests which lead us to a long-term interest, a long-term relationship with Central Asia. Then, of course, there are those elements of American policy which in the United States seem right and just, but other parts of the world are seen as complicating factors. And that's our interest in promoting freedom, both political freedom and economic freedom. And it's those factors which make our relationship with Uzbekistan not quite straightforward, not quite clear, complicating factors. So my point to everyone here is that we are right now, because of our critical short-term interests in Afghanistan, involved in a close relationship with Tashkent, which we want to improve. But for that relationship to exist in the long haul, we also have to be able to say something about that last element of American policy, which relates to democratic freedoms, economic openness, and for that matter, human rights. And our relationship with all the countries of Central Asia, including with Uzbekistan, will in part be colored by how those issues are dealt with and how they play out. My hope is that the second honeymoon period will be prolonged, and we'll find a way to continue a close and ever-growing relationship. But that's only possible if, again, these last issues are somehow addressed, because they will play a part in determining the future of this relationship. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.